I have to be very polite this evening, be very careful of my P's and Q's, because introducing somebody from the university who did their studies in the University of Edinburgh, but I did mine in the University of Glasgow. I have to watch out what I say. But no, Gill is the president of the RSC Society of Chemistry currently. She's professor of chemistry in the University of Southampton, where she's been head of school for some years, and she's been working on a very extensive program of research which she's going to talk about and I'm not even going to touch on. So without any more ado, Gill, you have the floor. Thank you again for coming, accepting our invitation to come and join us.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to save you from the research talk actually. I'm going to spend a little bit of time this evening. First of all, thank you so much for the opportunity to visit and to be here in person and in the same space as you. It's really, really special for me. That, is one of the fantastic things about my term as president, has been the opportunity to go out, and poor Tom that preceded me, everything was done from his kitchen by Zoom. I of course picked up the baton after him and have had the chance to go out and travel and connect up with our community, which is such an important part of the job that we do. So yeah, it's a real pleasure to be here. And my intention this evening is to share a little bit of an update on some of the things that have been going on in RSC. Some of them I hope you'll be at least somewhat familiar with, and I'll be around afterwards, so I'm happy to talk to anybody about bits of research if that's, if you want to do that a little bit later on. So I'm coming towards the end of my presidency. It's been, it wouldn't be overstating it to say it's been something that I will treasure for the rest of my life actually. It's been a fantastic experience. I'm a chemist through and through. I've always been passionate about chemistry, but also passionate about the community and how the community can work together to support each other, to drive change, and we'll talk a little bit about that within the next little while, and to nurture the next generation of young people coming through into chemistry, because it's such an important discipline. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about what we call the future of the chemical sciences. So some of the things that are going on in the RSC. So we are, as you know, a community of actually now almost 60,000 members across the world. That gives us an amazing wealth of experience, different career stages, different areas of science, different roles in, career roles in academia and industry, across small, medium-sized companies into large corporates and so on, so that you get a really good mix of people with expertise that we can draw on to try to champion chemistry as a discipline. And of course, one of the main ambitions of the RSC is to use chemistry to make the world a better place. So to make change, to improve to tackle some of the challenges that are out there, and we, as well as all of the academic and industrial chemists. Of course, we've got a huge community of teachers, and the RSC does a lot of work, as I'm sure some of you are aware, a lot of work and a lot of resources to support teachers, because they're the ones that are in the classroom and meeting with the young people day in, day out, and have a much greater impact if we can support them to maintain their familiarity with what's happening currently in chemistry, and to support them to evolve the curriculum as time moves forward. Then that's obviously beneficial for everybody. So in terms of the purpose of the RSC, of course we know that chemistry is a powerful catalyst for change, and this is very much the charter for the RSC, the mission, which is to help the chemical science community, because it's not the RSC that does most of the work. It's people sitting in this room and in other rooms that I've had the pleasure to be with over the last couple of years. It's our community that does a lot of the hard work and brings that expertise together. So in terms of some of the impacts, obviously over the last few years with the pandemic, the very obvious example of developing vaccines, medicines, diagnostics when the world needed them most, and we will continue to need them as we go forward. Keeping food and water clean and in good supply, creating revolutionary technologies to generate energy and store energy in a safe way and in a way that is less reliant on fossil and less challenged by geopolitical situations across the world, which does put a big pressure and shifts the dial somewhat. But also inspiring young minds, inspiring the next generation of chemists, I think, and helping young people and people transitioning at different stages of their career, of course, to forge their paths to fulfilling long-term careers, and being part of that community is really important. And as I say, you as members are absolutely central to that. They're the core of what the RSC does. You have the knowledge and the expertise across our membership, which is really what drives things forward. And we rely, all of us, and certainly I do, I rely on our community to give us information of what the challenges are, and because people see, they can spot things on the horizon from a particular lens that I wouldn't necessarily pick up, and having that dialogue and then being able to take action, whether it be policy, whether it be in a different area, to learn from that and use it to advance our cause is of course really important. One of the areas, of course, that the RSC has a big role to play, and chemistry has a big role to play, is in sustainability. And contributing to a more sustainable world is, it's never been more important. I think I've been saying this for a few years, and it only gets, I think, a more significant challenge actually as you see the effects on the climate and so on. I was in the Senate in Wales with the members of the Senate on just Tuesday there, and explaining, that if the predictions of 2.5 degree Celsius degree rise in temperature is correct, then the devastation that will cause is very significant. And we must step up to that challenge. We must acknowledge the importance of chemistry, both historically in having a role to play in creating some of that problem, but certainly in finding the solutions as we go forward. So a recent survey conducted by the RSC, 99% of chemical researchers said that their research had potential applications in at least one of the UN Global Challenge Sustainable Development Goal areas. And of course we have the advantage of being able to bring together people from industry, academia and government to get them in the same space and to tackle these issues as we try to drive things forward. So I'll try to just give you a few examples of some of the specific projects that are going on in this area. And first of all, just to pick up on polymers and liquid formulations. It's a bit of a mouthful. We kind of abbreviate it to PLFs, but PLFs are in very many of the everyday household items that we use: shampoos, conditioners, paints, cleaning materials and so on. And they are water-soluble polymers, but at the moment these are polymers that are made and used for a variety of reasons, some because it makes the product feel better for the consumer, and some because they function better by having these polymers present. But the industry is worth about $125 billion per annum, and that's all of that is just going down into the wastewater supplies as people use their products. And so, something like 36 million tonnes of PLFs are made each year. A reference to England here, Bob, I do apologise, but it's enough to fill Wembley Stadium 32 times over. And that's just being, flushed down into the waterways. So none of it's recycled, none of it's recovered. So finding ways to create more sustainable circular methods for producing these PLFs is a significant challenge. And interestingly, and it's an important point, I think, there's both the scientific arguments for why one should be using a circular method to prepare these materials. But for companies to do that, there's got to be an economic driver as well. And of course, a value of $125 billion annually, there's an economic driver which helps to focus minds. And for the companies to remain relevant, they have to be operating this space. So the RSC has been able to bring together a task force with leaders from many of the big companies, Unilever, BASF, Crown Paints and others. And they've been working on developing a kind of blueprint, a 40-year, sorry, not for 40-year, a target for 2040 in terms of creating this circular economy for polymers and liquid formulations. And that, I was fortunate to be at the launch of the report back in, I guess, July last year. That's now published. It's on the RSC website if anybody's interested. But most importantly, it's not about having a report on the website, it's about what you do with that report. And so the RSC is working with colleagues, obviously, across the sector to create that, to bring, getting companies all to work in the same space when they're all in competition is always quite a challenging environment. But there's a collective appreciation that this is something that needs to be addressed. And so, being able, the RSC is kind of independent, if you like, can help to broker these conversations. And we're looking at the first launch of funding coming through to support the development of these more circular routes using polymers that can be recycled and reused. So that's just one area of work that's going on. Some of you may have seen this sort of diagram before. This is the kind of planetary boundaries as it's described. And essentially what this is saying is that we need to tackle chemical waste and pollution as one of the major threats on the same, exceeding the planetary boundary for chemical waste. So that's the novel entities up here. This is where the chemicals really sit. And you can see that this is now reaching quite far out from the safe zone, which is the green zone in the middle. And so some of the reports that are out there say that chemical waste and pollution is a threat to our environment on the same level as loss of biodiversity or indeed climate change. And we know the challenges that are there. So the idea was set up about a decade ago, so this planetary boundary, and reaching these thresholds will cause irreversible damage to our environment. So clearly sectors that are like chemistry, that are heavy producers and users of chemicals, have a critical role to play and a responsibility indeed to tackle this and try to bring this under control. But you need a global governance structure for this to happen. We can't do this in isolation, either within chemistry or indeed within any nation. And so there's been a lot of work going on over the last couple of years to bring together that global governance framework to enable organisations and governments to work together to take a coordinated approach which is informed by science. It's not a political agenda, it's an evidence-based agenda. And so that's really why the RSC, along with a number of other organisations, successfully campaigned for a new UN Intergovernmental Panel on Chemicals and Waste Management and Pollution Prevention, which is like the UN IPCC role in climate change. And so over the last year, this photograph was taken, I guess, sometime in the late part of last year, and Camilla in the centre there is the lead from the RSC in this space, but again working with people like Tom Welton, my predecessor as president, and obviously somebody with a strong background in sustainability. So they've been working together to create this panel, to campaign to get this set up, and made significant progress ensuring that global diversity of independent scientists is strongly represented within this intergovernmental panel. And so they're populating the panel as we speak now, so this is really very, very current, and the expectation is that this will be up and running in 2025. So that's a clear step towards tackling some of the problems that we have to deal with, and we have to do in a coordinated way. Often, as you well know, often the countries, the people who are most affected by the environmental consequences are in countries that have least ability to pay for and resource the recovery of the land and so on. So it's really important that we work in a coordinated way. Third area to mention is our Sustainable Laboratories project, and that's been going now for a couple of years. 84% of chemists, researchers, would like to be able to do more to reduce their environmental footprint from the work that they're actually doing in their own labs. And of course, it's one thing to want to be able to do, that's another thing to know how to do it. And there is expertise out there, and lots of good ideas out there, and a will to try to change this. So the researchers told us that a number of factors, a number of different interventions could help them to make progress, including having networks to discuss the challenges that they're dealing with and to think about how best to deal with things. Training in sustainable, doing chemistry in a sustainable way, professional development, data sharing, and also recognition to reward individuals who are successful in this sort of area. So in September last year, we launched our Sustainable Labs grants. These are grants of up to £10,000 for each particular project for anybody around the world whose application accelerates the chemical sciences community's approach to environmentally sustainable research and innovation. The first round of recipients was announced, I should say, about 3 weeks ago. There were 31 initial projects funded, and they were across the globe. The majority were in the UK, but there were a good number in other countries. And one of the things that we've asked, working with the award, the recipients of the grants, is to share what they learn from the work that they're doing, and to try to bring that back into the ecosystem and find out what works and share that more widely. So that's a positive intervention that it's helping individual labs and groups of labs to work together. The next round will be announced the next round of grants will open in September, and you never know, there might be an RSC international section in Belgium that might have a proposal to put into the Sustainable Labs project. So that's an interesting space. I know from my own group in Southampton, there's a lot of interest in trying to do things. We try and work in a sustainable way as best we can, but we've got things to learn, and there's a real enthusiasm from the researchers to do this, and so this is trying to drive some of that change. And of course we want to bring industry into this space as well, because they can not just once we find the right things, the things that have the greatest impact, they can do these things at scale, and that's of course very important. Cleaning up drinking water is another campaign that the RSC's launched over the last year or so. So this is again about these often referred to as PFAS, so these per and polyfluoroalkyl substances that tend to stay around in the environment for very many years. They're not readily broken down in the environment, and the net effect is that they get into our soils, they get into our waterways, and around the world it's clear that they persist for a long period of time, and they're used in many day-to-day products that we all have in our homes. So non-stick cookware, waterproof clothing, and so on. But there is mounting evidence that these PFAS have significant health implications. So releasing these into the waterways above threshold, safe threshold levels is obviously not a sensible thing to be doing. And so we've been working with our community experts, particularly in the environmental space, and come to the conclusion that the UK safe limits for PFAS are much too high. And so we're campaigning, and our community's campaigning, writing to MPs and so on. We're not quite sure which MPs, because everything went up in the air just yesterday, and it's been going up in the air for a long time, honestly. But that's a different part of the story. But yes, the point is that they're working by members writing to their MPs and campaigns which have been on the BBC, been in the Guardian. There's been a lot of press coverage across the UK in terms of the campaign that the RSC's championing here. That's led to questions in Parliament and prompting government responses and putting pressure on government and ministers more broadly to really reflect on whether they should be listening to the evidence from the scientists about the safe limits and reducing the limits. And all we're asking is actually that we get the limits in the UK to the same sort of level as they are in the US and in Europe, actually. So it's not exactly a huge ask, and there's a lot of work has gone in already. But of course, persuading ministers, most of whom aren't, of course, scientists, at least in the UK, that's the case. Persuading them to make this sort of change, you need to provide them with strong evidence and the dialogue to go along with that to help them to go on that journey. So that's an important, and this will remain a priority for the RSC until we get this one over the line and see the consequences. So the next area I'd like to talk about is how we work with partners to nurture discovery and innovation, particularly that ecosystem, and predominantly this work is in the UK, but it's not solely in the UK. We do it chiefly by influencing policy, identifying and addressing gaps in support, and by inspiring the next generation of chemical scientists. And of course, that's all these are all key components of a successful innovation, translation, and setting up of bringing new science into the industry and spin-outs and small, medium-sized enterprises and so on. So there are topics that we know members in the RSC have a really strong view on and understand. There's a lot of experience in a membership in terms of this sort of space, and so they're able to drive that agenda. And so, in that sort of policy space, we engage very closely with policymakers on issues that have an impact on the chemical sciences, or where we have important expertise to bring to the discussion. And at the moment, our priority recently has been ensuring proper funding for UK science. You'll be aware, of course, that in 2016 something happened that we're still recovering from, I would say, or maybe not recovering from. But as a consequence of Brexit, of course, the UK was no longer part of the Horizon Europe programme. And I think we in the UK, and I really believe our mainland Europe partners, see the importance of collaboration. Science isn't done within closed borders; it's a global endeavour, and being able to build and nurture these collaborations and relationships with partners in other countries with different experiences, with different frameworks and so on, is a really important part of that whole agenda. So the work until since 2019 actually was trying to persuade the UK government to re-establish association with Europe in terms of Horizon Europe, and fortunately, after a lot of campaigning and a lot of hard work between involving ourselves, but also of course partners across the scientific disciplines, that was a key achievement that happened obviously a little bit I guess it's last year now, actually, in 2023. And that's a really, really important, even in these few years since the uncertainty about association with Horizon meant that a lot of these collaborations that take a long time to build, and you have to work at collaborations. That's the whole. But that's where interesting things happen. And unfortunately, these have kind of stagnated a bit, and so there's a real encouragement to researchers to re-engage and make sure that we can bring the benefits from the opportunity that comes here. It says here, as we head towards a UK election, I don't know who wrote this, but they clearly weren't up to date with the times. We are, of course, now going into an election in just a few weeks' time. But actually, the RSC some time ago put together its ask for the UK government, but working with our sister societies and other political parties to influence science's role as an election issue. I firmly believe that as we move into the future, if for nations to grow their economies and to be successful going forward, science has to play a really important part of that. And I really believe chemistry is at the heart of the science that needs to be done. It interfaces with all the other disciplines, and so that scientific space is really important for us as we go forward. Of course, the challenges with health and well-being, the challenges with education and global threats and so on. Means there are lots of different pressures on governments to do a variety of different things. But actually taking your eye off the science piece is for the long term really dangerous, because that's where innovation does come from, and where you can actually make significant change and hopefully leads the country and the world into a better space. So we've been obviously working with members throughout all of that work as we've been working on the policy side. There's quite a lot going on at the moment about migration and where students sit in the migration debate. And again, the idea that you don't allow students to move around internationally it seems madness to me. It's really important that young people, that we can draw in talent, train people, build our networks globally, and continue to have that relevance globally. And so that's a key part of the policy work that's going on at the moment. So in terms of identifying and addressing gaps, I mentioned the chemistry innovation ecosystem, and this idea of supporting. So chemistry is kind of unique in the sense that to get from lab-based discovery through to a viable, economically viable business company that is going to attract the funding and continue and be successful. It's a very deep valley and a very wide valley actually that you've got to cross to get to the point where you can take that sort of business forward. And we have some great innovations coming out of universities, all across the world. But getting the chemistry ones across and into successful, growing businesses and so on is really important. And it's often very expensive. And the hardest thing for the innovation side of the innovators trying to traverse that gap is securing enough funding to put the infrastructure in place to really test, get the evidence that allows then the investors to come in and put much larger sums of money to build that. So this Change Makers program, which is now where we brought all of this work under the Change Makers umbrella, if you like, is really about supporting this new entrepreneurial ecosystem. And again, the RSC has been working in this space for a number of years. Probably this is the 12th year it's been running its emerging technology competition. And again, I've had the pleasure of being able to attend these events where people come along with their, from PhD students and senior professors and everybody in between, come along with their ideas from the lab, how to, often around sort of clean tech sort of area, but describing what might be possible, but how do you support them to get that into a successful enterprise? So the emerging technologies competition has been really supportive in this space, and not just by the 4 or 5 each year that win the competitions in the different categories, but there's the mentoring and support that goes on with all of the other contestants, all of the other people involved in the competition, and that's sort of provided a framework for this wider effort in supporting the kind of deep tech chemistry companies that are tackling some of the global issues. And again, as a chemist and somebody that's pretty passionate about our subject and our community's power to make a difference, this is something I think is really important, because it is new innovative technologies. Chemists are great at creating these. We need to make sure that we can realise the potential from as many of these as possible, and Changemakers is something that the RSC is doing to try to help to support that sort of framework. Changemakers invitees are invited to master classes, investment pitching events, so they get all that sort of broader experience of not just they're obviously good at the lab work and putting all of that together, but to be successful in this space you need of course all of these other skills as well. So it's trying to put that all under one umbrella and support individuals and have the right people there to help to drive that forward. Oops. And of course, as we've talked a lot about the things that chemistry can do now, the things that chemistry, the chemical sciences more broadly can do going forward. But to be successful going forward, we need to have a workforce. We need to have the best talent, young people changing career direction, so on, coming through and contributing to our community. So engaging and inspiring the next generation is a really key part. And it's something I've personally been trying to really champion during my presidency, because I think the future is with the young people. They're the people who will be coming into our, into chemistry and the sciences more broadly, and hopefully realising some of the opportunities that we've been talking about. And so one of the key things that we've been doing in this space is making the case that every young person in school should have access to an inspiring chemistry education, and for that of course we need fantastic teachers. We need teachers who are supported, who are able to be keeping up to date with what's happening in the discipline, and who understand and can support and nurture the young people. So in this respect we have a lot of resources. We've got something like 7,000 active users of our Learn Chemistry platform. So these are teachers and technicians and so on working in that space. And we also have an annual teaching survey, which is a really good way of sampling, often in the region of 3,000 or 4,000 responses coming from teachers across the different schools, telling us about what are the most pressing challenges, and then we can use that as evidence to put pressure again, try and put evidence to policymakers and try to make a difference in terms of some of the decisions that are being made. And as I say, in Cardiff just the other day there were meetings going on while we were there, meetings with RSC colleagues and teaching colleagues from different parts with MSs about the decisions that are being made in Wales and how that can have not the ideal impact for young people. So just trying to get them to realise the consequences of some of the decisions that they might be about to make, and encourage them to rethink that. Of course, you'll not be surprised to know that the headlines from the annual teaching survey are about understaffing, managing behaviour in the classroom rather than managing necessarily the science itself. Insufficient technical support to enable young people to be able to do practical science. And probably most of us in the room that are trained as chemists, that was probably the bit that we got maybe most excited about and most motivated by. And I think it's really important that we keep these key elements and look after them in schools. So the other, another area that we've been working on, and it's been again very active over the last year, is thinking about what should science culture look like, and really supporting. I mean, the RSC's, I think, for many years been very clear about the importance of having an open, inclusive, and enabling community, which will be beneficial for everyone. And that's about knocking down some of the uncomfortable barriers. Some of the data, I think the RSC, a lot of the work that we've done in terms of breaking the barriers, so the gender inequality report that was published about 5 years ago now, it was very uncomfortable for people at the time, rightly so, because it didn't show chemistry in a good light at all. But I think one of the things that I like about the way the RSC does this is that it always uses evidence, so that you can argue with opinion, you can't really argue with evidence. We are all scientists and we kind of respect evidence. But then the important thing after that is to, even if it's uncomfortable, is to accept that that's the reality and we can do something about it. And so the work in inclusion and diversity and culture and so on is very much about trying to do this. And this vision for science culture is available on the RSC website, as you can see there. And I think the message is that this was launched in just September last year. A great science culture, which we think is essential for chemistry and science to be successful going forward, is to be rigorous, safe and supportive, ethical and responsible, open and collaborative, and accessible and inclusive. And certainly for me, a lot of these words resonate very strongly, that it's about bringing people in, being part of a community, recognising the importance of difference, and hearing different opinions and working together to get the best outcomes. So much of our ongoing work aligns with this, and really addressing these 5 key qualities is a really key part of that. But another aspect of it is the accessibility of research findings, that the knowledge in the literature. Oops, I've just managed to shut the whole thing down. I do apologise. I found the button. That's okay. So the RSC, I think about a year or so ago, committed to being 100% open access by 2028, and that was a bold decision. But it was a bold decision driven by a recognition that, I go back to my point earlier, that a lot of people that are most impacted by the consequences of climate change and so on are in countries that there isn't the funding available to allow people access to paying for access to papers and so on. So by switching to an open access approach, we make information much more readily available. I think that's an important underpinning principle. We are the first publisher in chemistry. As you know, the RSC has a large publishing arm. It's a bold decision. There's a lot of work to do. It's a significant culture shift, and that culture shift is at different place in different parts of the world. But over the last year, something like 32% of all of the, I think, 35,000 articles that were published in RSC journals were fully open access, and so there's that's a good starting point. Of course, it gets harder as you move along the path, but the models that are emerging from this are really important. And one of the examples would be the transformative deal with the institutions in Germany that meant that no matter where researchers are in Germany, in fact not just researchers, anybody in Germany can access all of the RSC literature without having to pay for it. It's like government, the government agree the deal effectively, and then the scientists and researchers have access to all of that information. And so that's a really important step forward. I say there's a lot of work to do, but it's about making information available to everybody. I've talked a bit about inclusion and diversity. I won't say too much about this, but I'm very happy to chat afterwards. This is the Missing Elements report, which was about the absence, almost complete absence of black scientists, black chemists in the UK at professorial level. And that's a snapshot phrase which is easy to say, but actually what that really reflects is a very steep drop-off from, in terms of the demographics across the country, the demographics of black and minority ethnic young people coming into chemistry degrees, and then you start on a very steep slope as they are left out of the equation and drift off into other things. And so this report was really did cause a bit of there was quite a lot of pushback actually, and it was made for uncomfortable reading for me. But at the end of the day, as I say, we understand evidence, and the data are very clear. And then the question is, what do you do about it? It's not about putting a report on the shelf to get dusty and moping over it. It's trying to then use that to catalyse change. And I'm really proud of the work the RSC has done in this space. Ali Palermo and her team have been amazing, and our community in supporting this. And many of the chemical companies that we've got strong connections with, of course, recognise that diversifying their workforce is an absolutely key part to having a successful future and having better decision making and reaching being a more successful business. So they're working closely with us, and we've launched a couple of programs. So they set up a race and ethnicity unit with £1.5 million over a pilot period, with the intention of demonstrating that change can happen and using that to bring others in, so that it's a self-sustaining model. And I think I have a comment here from one of the young people that was in the first cohort of our Broadening Horizons programme. And Broadening Horizons is a programme for undergraduate or early postgraduate chemists from black and minority ethnic backgrounds. They can sign up for this programme and they're assigned mentors. They get placements in industry. They get a lot of opportunity to interact together and to be just signposting some of the opportunities, and having mentors in the industry, which has been really important. I've had the chance to attend some of these, and it's been really energising. But I'll just read you a quote from Carla Aldington, who's an early stage postgraduate student at research in chemistry at Imperial College in London. She said, so she was at the first cohort. She said the first day when we were all together in the RSC's Burlington house was remarkable. Being in a room full of chemists who looked like me was the best feeling ever. For the first time in my academic career, I realised I did belong in the world of chemistry. And that's quite a powerful statement actually. That I hadn't realised that was necessarily how we all have our own lens. And the great thing about working in this sort of environment is that because we've got such a diverse membership and we're trying to tackle some of these challenges, it opens your blinkers, and everybody, all of us, can support and mentor and champion and challenge decisions that are being made. And so I think this work in inclusion and diversity more broadly, not just the race and ethnicity work, is really important. It's something that I think the RSC stands above many of its international counterparts actually. It's driving, I know when I've travelled internationally across Canada, South America, out in New Zealand and so on, that the RSC's inclusion and diversity work is being used to drive change in other chemical societies and other disciplines as well. So that's about the power of partnership actually, and again something I think we've got to really nurture as we go forward. So I won't spend any more time on that. I'm just going to round up in terms of I think at the end of where we are at this point in time, it's we're in an unprecedented era of ability to discover, understand, visualise, and create positive impact from chemistry. It's never been more important for us to do that. In the UK, the chemistry using professionals contribute massively to the economy every year. So there's no question that chemistry has a very important role, and I'm absolutely certain that this will be reflected in other economies, of course, all around the world. What we've done is then create a campaign, the chemistry, the Join In with Chemistry campaign, which is a couple of examples here and on the next slide, just to kind of signal where chemistry has a key role to play in terms of making water cleaner, in terms of electric cars and so on, so driving the battery technologies and plenty of other areas too. So these are up on the website and be used extensively as you look outside and trying to influence, make sure that chemistry has a positive role to play. So that's our Join In campaign. So that's probably me come to the end of the kind of update, but I'm not quite going to finish that. If it's okay, if I may just borrow a few minutes more of your time. I just wanted to kind of share a little bit of personal reflection. I've sort of told you about what's going on more broadly in terms of the RSC, but for me, as I say, I'm coming towards the end of my term as president, and the AGM's at the beginning of July, and I'll be sorry to hand over the baton, but of course pleased as well, because it's very important that there's new energy comes in, and we continue to drive forward. Everybody's going to have their own perspectives on that, which is really important. But I would like to just, from my point of view, I joined the RSC as a PhD student, and I joined the RSC because I was training to be a chemist. I wanted to be a chemist, and I wanted to be part of a chemistry community. And the RSC was that community for me, and remains so to this day. It's a professional body for chemical scientists, and it's the family that I felt I belonged to. In these days, I joined because it was, clearly it was helping to build a network for me. Had opportunities to go to conferences. I spoke my first lecture as a PhD student. My first research lecture was in an RSC conference up in Scotland, and that was really important. These are kind of seminal moments for any young person coming through their career, and I can honestly say I never, for one moment, imagined that I would have the honour of being, ultimately becoming president. It's been a fantastic experience, but it wasn't for it wasn't just for that reason that I put myself forward to become president. I did it because I believe very strongly that we as members and the RSC as an organisation, that the work we do is really important. That sharing of information, advocacy, the work we do towards more sustainable planets, better education, and supporting our colleagues is really important, and we mustn't lose sight of that. I think these are really important, and I think everybody's got a contribution to make. And I know from, I see the work that you do here in Belgium, and it's inspiring to see the energy and the commitment from people to drive things forward. So I think we've got a very positive future to look forward to. I've worked very closely with our RSC staff over the last couple of years, and I've been taken out of my comfort zone more than once, I would say. Probably most weeks, actually, at least once a week, if not more. And I've learned a great deal about the range of activity, and again, I've been involved in RSC for a very long time in many different guises. But when you see it all, you're sitting, on the board of trustees and so on, and you can see all of this work going on. It's really incredible, and it's a testament to, I would say, both the staff in the RSC, and we're very fortunate to have some fantastic staff, fantastic leadership in the RSC, but it's definitely a testament to our community and its ability to, put in that effort, work together, and drive change. We are a member organisation, and it's, as I say, it's never really been more important that for our membership to work together, to bring different perspectives, to bring new initiatives, and to recognise how to tackle some of the challenges, the things that we really care about. One of the examples that I think from my point of view has been really successful in the last couple of years As we've changed, as we went through a governance restructure a few years ago, we changed the various councils in the RSC became communities, and that maybe does reflect the idea that we are, it's not a small number of people sitting at the top of the helm in any of these councils, it's the community more widely. But we also introduced a Science and Innovation Leadership Forum, and so the community presidents from each of the organic community, Dalton community, etc., all meet together with myself and the President-elect, and with the leadership team, Helen Payne and others at the RSC. So we do that a couple of times a year, and the meeting is very much led by the community presidents, and the point is to share knowledge, best practice, challenges, problems, to understand the communication that's coming from the ground up into the Board of Trustees, and thinking about how that fits into the strategy. We started that off, as I say, the first meeting was a couple of years ago, and it was a bit clunky. It was quite hard work to begin with, because people were not quite sure what they should be saying. We had one about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it was amazing, just the quality of discussion, the energy and commitment that the communities are putting in to feed their ideas through, and obviously the President's then feeding back information from the Board of Trustees and so on. So I would say it's a much more joined up. I think there was a bit of a hiatus in the past, and so that the introduction of the SILT has been really important. I'm proud of what we've accomplished in the past 2 years, but I really do want to focus on what's important for the future. We were 2 years ago, we were emerging from the pandemic, and there was a real need to reconnect with the community and our international partners. And I really do think the RSC's got a critical role to bring people together and make sure that we're listening and sharing and supporting and challenging each other, because that's where we can make change happen. It matters more than ever, as within the world, across the world, UK and elsewhere. Countries are preparing for general elections. These general elections can have a profound impact on funding for science and innovation. Certainly, if you look across Europe, you see some contradictions in terms of border controls, internationalism, global mobility, and so on, and a lot of pressure on science funding. So these are really important things that we need to keep focused on. We mustn't imagine that we've somehow solved the problems. We've got to keep driving that agenda forward, and that means working with our international partners, because we have much more clout, and I think I think the RSC works very well internationally with our chemical societies in country, and that it really is a partnership. So that's something I think is really important. I'm going out to China in a couple of weeks' time to meet the RSC team out there, but also to meet the Chinese Chemical Society and to talk about some of the challenges that are facing us. Sustainability, the UN panel and the sustainable labs I've talked about. Again, I think we're a long way from solving the problems, but we certainly have to keep driving that work forward. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing this UN intergovernmental panel on chemicals, waste and pollution, and hopefully that will have some real teeth, but evidence-based, and listening to the scientists and using that information in a constructive way. I've talked about innovation and supporting industry, again, critical for the future. If we are going to see the sort of innovative strategies coming forward to tackle some of the PLFs and other challenges, then that innovation ecosystem is really important. Education skills. We've got a lot of problems in our schools. I'm not sure how it is generally in Belgium, but in the UK there are a lot of challenges with recruiting teachers, retaining teachers. If we don't have chemistry teachers, then we don't have a future generation of young people coming through into chemistry. So it's vital that we drive that forward. And of course, inclusion and diversity, which I've probably said enough about. So with that, I'm just going to wrap things up and close by saying that I'm really grateful to have had the opportunity to come over to Belgium, particularly when the sun's shining, and to travel through the on the tram. It was beautiful. It's been really, I'm really enjoying my visit here. Thank you very much for coming along this evening, and I'm be delighted to chat and meet as many of you as possible over the course of the evening. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Gill. We might ask you a few questions.
Absolutely, yeah, no problem. I may not be able to answer them, but I'll do my best. That's right.
Right, who's going to start the ball rolling?
We have here a fund in honor of Norman Lloyd,
Where we mentioned
the
that.
husband of Setsko here. And so my question is, do you handle from the UK a large number of funds that give grants to students, etc.? Is that a big activity within?
So the RSC has some grant schemes for bursaries for summer placements, for example. Not so much to, well, maybe for undergraduate students over the summer to give them some research experience. Mm-hmm. There's a scheme that runs each year in that respect. But I've dealt with similar sort of funds when I was head of school in Southampton, but not through the RSC. It tends not to get, it's a bit difficult to get involved in all the details, because all of these situations have got particular, they've got their own criteria. So yeah, we don't really have much experience in that space. Obviously there are some trust funds and things for prizes, but they tend not to be for young students actually.
Thank you.
What would you say? Sorry. Go ahead.
Just very thank you. I'm a chemist myself, and I also study chemistry in the UK. But it's a long time ago. I mean, I know, because the popularity of the discipline come in time. Right? Now it's AI is probably very popular. Before, I think it's computing science and material science, things like that. Today, I mean, how is the younger generation? How do they view chemistry? Do they have the passion for that, to go into chemistry as a university degree or not?
So it's something we've been, we keep a very close eye on. And when I was head of school, I was on in the UK. There's a body which is all the heads of chemistry from all the universities get to have a kind of community together, and I was involved quite closely in the kind of standing committee for that group. And we spent a lot of time looking at data to understand the trends, because it's a bit cyclical in terms of student numbers for chemistry. It has been declining, but it's in the last year or so it's started to pick up again. Maybe in part that's a realisation that chemistry is an important driver for a sustainable future. So many of the challenges. It's hard. It's a hard. It's in the UK. It's probably the hardest A level in England. It's probably people might say that would be maths or physics, but I think the challenge with chemistry is you have to be able to cover quite different skill sets. And of course the practical side is really important. It's also the bit that often is most motivational for young people, and the pressure in terms of school budgets. If you're a headmaster and you've got to trim your budget, do you get rid of people or do you squeeze out labs? Neither of these is palatable. But actually, if you take the laboratory skills out of chemistry, you no longer have chemistry. I would say, you can do certain things with data and modelling and AI and so on. But at the end of the day, you need to be able to make things. We are the people that can make things, from the smallest particles upwards.
Yes,
And there's a really important, and it's important we keep reminding people of that. So I think the picture is it's not particularly positive, but it's not disastrous either. And there is some upturn in student numbers. I think it's also about how we articulate. We're not very good at articulating the importance of chemistry. We get kind of, and in the UK, I don't know what it's like in Belgium, but the curriculum's needing a good shake-up, I would say. Teaching young people about blast furnaces from the year dots, and the technology that's there now in terms of chemistry is, there are some important underlying principles that need to be retained, but teaching a bit more contemporary content at a level that is useful to the young people, I think is a key part. And it's really hard to get curriculum change. Of course, all it does is put even more pressure on teachers. So it's a tricky balance to meet. But we are trying to push for. I think there'll be some curriculum change in the next 18 months or so. So there's a lot of work going on, sort of working out again with counterparts in physics and biology and so on. What do we need to cover? What should be in there? And what do we get rid of? Because certainly as academics, we're very good at bringing more in and never taking anything out. Everybody's pet subject's got to be in there. And of course, you can't do that. You've got to make some space to consolidate knowledge as well. So, long answer to a short question.
It's such an important discipline. It helps to solve all this problem. This 40 million liquid form and all these things. It's one example. There's so many others.
There are many possibilities. But at the end of the day, you've got to inspire. Most of the people I know who are chemists were inspired to do chemistry. They just something clicked with them, and that's what's brought them through. And it's a challenging discipline, but actually, once you get to grips with it, you can rise to that challenge. It's not an impossible ask, but you've got to make it interesting and relevant, I think, for. And a lot of the young people that we've spoken to, they tell us that they want to know more about how do we solve some of the sustainable development challenges and so on. So trying to think about how do you do that in a meaningful way in school education without scratching the surface of so many things but being superficial. It's quite a tricky balance. Very good question.
I think one of the problems, if I could just make a comment here with regard to Belgium, we have had a tendency in Belgian schools. When I came here in 1973, the Belgian educational system was extremely good. It has declined steadily because I have the regret to inform you that we have had a series of ministers responsible for education who, like dogs with lampposts, all want to leave their trace on the system. And they have done so. And in so doing, they have totally thrown the curriculum up in the air so that teachers don't know from one year to another what they're supposed to be teaching. And I think it's about time we went back to good old-fashioned basics. And maybe one of the things that institutions like the RSC Chemistry should be trying to do very, very strongly is to try and send a message to educators throughout the world that we need to teach chemistry in a way that gets people excited and enthusiastic about it, and not in a way where we drown them with lots of data.
There was actually universities in the UK put some pressure on a few years ago, saying that there needed to be more mathematical skills in chemistry. But again, didn't take anything out. Everything needs to be in there. And this is not, mathematics of course is important, but so are many other things, and at the end of the day, you've got to look at the workload. It's perceived to be the hardest A level in the UK.
There is also the danger, even at the university level. I know that from talking to colleagues in British universities, many universities now, final year projects for undergraduates will be literature based rather than having any experimental component, because there are no budgets available for buying chemicals. And that's one of the problems that we have, I think.
I mean, it's one
as
of
you
the...
said, chemistry is a practical science. It shouldn't be in front of a computer.
One of the things the RSC does, of course, is accredit courses. And that provides, it's meant to be a framework to help chemistry departments. And maintaining practical chemistry is absolutely a core pillar of that. Because, universities would always rather we didn't do lab work because it's expensive, and facilities, the consumables, etc. But that is such an important part of chemistry. So the lever that we have in the RSC in that sense is mainly through accreditation of university degrees, but also through the employers, the workforce reports and the skills projecting forward. What are the skills that people need, that companies need, industry needs going forward, and then recognising, well, where are you going to get that? What do you need to put into your programmes? But universities also need to modernise their curriculum. I'm absolutely clear about that, and we're in that basket as well in my institution. In terms of, some places have done it. It's really hard to do because you've got to keep everything, all the plates spinning while you're trying to make fundamental changes. But it's an important step that we've got to take, actually.
Good. I would suggest that we have other questions. You couldn't address them to Gill during the drinks break. We will without. Thank you very much. And if my good trusty friend here, Fabio, will give me the little present that we have for you. I said to you, you'd already bought something with family, but this one is for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.